Thank you for your work and for having me here. And I'd like to say a special appreciation to all of you for coming. Lord Tony Young, a member of the advisory board. I actually read this report. I can pass a test on it. And what the report really proves is that the focus and foundation on teacher training is the right focus. I'll tell you an example off of the report that will make the point. Every year at the opening of the United Nations, our foundation sponsors the Clinton Global Initiative. And we bring in NGOs from around the world, philanthropists and business people, and we ask them to make commitments and to keep them, and we work all year long trying to help both develop the commitments and to help people keep the commitment. A large number of these commitments are in education. One, not particularly big one, done by a young American entrepreneur in his 20s, who was sent as a student to work in Uganda, involves building schools in Uganda. What has that to do with teacher training? He discovered that if he went to these villages and worked with the villagers and let them build the schools according to government specifications adjusted to the climate of the villages, that he could build them for 1/4 of what the government was spending. And he got a commitment from the government that if he did that, they would spend the money that they otherwise would have spent on the schools, on the teachers. Paying them properly, training them better. I actually went to one of these schools, not this year, but last year, on my trip to Africa. And in 2 of the classes, I saw teachers teaching primary school students that I would have been thrilled to have teach my daughter when she was their age. It was obvious that they were intelligent, well-motivated, and well-trained. And by simply reducing the block cost, they had freed up money from the government that was otherwise scarce to do what the Varkey Foundation is trying to do with its teacher training program, which ironically started in Uganda. Why is that important? They have the second biggest average family in the world. Average family has 7 children. I don't know what they're going to do when they outgrow their own country. But if you read these results, it is obvious how much that matters. It's true that you can't find any necessary corollary between the performance of the students and the respect of the teaching profession, but that says more about culture and knowledge and political climate than it does about what's actually happening. People who actually study results have all talked about, well, we know that China emphasizes education, and we know that Shanghai schools in particular are done really well on international measures of science and math. We know that Singapore has done well for decades now. We know that the most astonishing development in Europe is the relatively rapid rise over the last 15 years of the schools in Finland, which are the subject of study in this report. The interesting thing about the Finnish schools is that all your expectations would say, well, what do you expect? It's just another one of those little small Nordic countries with lots of money, few students, and they already were really smart. But the Finnish schools are highly diverse. There are 45 different native languages spoken by students now in those schools. And in contrast to the United States, for example, the Finns decided to give no standardized tests to their students, mandated by the state. So the only tests that the students take for comparison purposes are international tests, where they do extraordinarily well. They decided they would work on nothing but trying to get the best teachers. So that only about 1 in 10 applicants are hired. Virtually 100% of the applicants graduate in the top 10% of their university class. And then they work and work and work on the excellence of teachers. And this requires a lot of rethinking on the part of many of us who've labored in this field for, in my case, since I became a governor 34 years ago. I began to go to classes and think about things. The United States has this huge emphasis on, I think, too many tests. But virtually 100% of us believe that all of our classes and students need to be measured on some regular basis on the exams. The Finn said, it'll take care of itself if you have the best teachers. And so you heard the panel on this remarkable report that was issued, but it won't take you that long to read it. If you haven't read it, I urge you to actually get a copy of it and read it. It's a very important contribution. But the conclusion that I drew is someone who has some responsibility to offer input to the foundation for what they're doing, is that this focus on teacher training and improving preparation and teacher capacity is by far the most cost-effective thing we can be doing. Because you've got one whole country now that's small enough to study and diverse enough to be relevant to the rest of the world, that came out of nowhere to finish in the top 5 of every meaningful educational ranking, that gives no standardized tests and spends all their energy trying to make the teachers better and to recruit better people in the first place. So this teacher training effort that you have underway, I think, is really important. Because none of us, unless we are in charge of some education ministry somewhere, we don't have the capacity to do the systems that would select the talent pool that the Finns select. We have to work with the talent pool that's there. The people that are willing, who are basically exceedingly well motivated, and they'd be doing something else for a living. And therefore, it seems to me that if you really read and think about the conclusion you draw for what the rest of us should do, we ought to support this foundation so that they could train 3, 5, 10, 20 times as many teachers as they're otherwise going to be able to train as quickly as possible, because you still have 61 million kids who don't go to primary school, 71 million kids who don't go to primary and secondary school, more than that who go to schools without any trained teachers or appropriate learning materials. So they're in school in name only, in a world where we know that every single year of schooling in a very poor country adds 10% to earning capacity per year for life. So I'm really, I read this report this morning and I thought, you know, when they started this, I didn't know whether this is the best expenditure of their time or money or not. When they started this, I thought, well, maybe they should just go build more schools. Low-income kids who can't afford to go to their schools and can't get caught up in the scholarship programs which they generously provide. And I decided that they were right and I was wrong. That this teacher training thing is, in a world of limited resources, the single most important thing we could be doing today to respond to what we find in this report. And it any of you had been with me and that little Ugandan school and seen those two young women teaching those kids, you would have had exactly the same reaction I did. I wish I'd have been in a class with those teachers. I've been happy as my child was in their class. This is a problem we can't solve. Intelligence is evenly distributed throughout the world, and so are dreams. The connection between intelligence and dreams and developing that intelligence and realizing those dreams is something the rest of us have to provide. And the foundation is doing it, I think, in the most cost-effective way. So if they had more resources, they could train more teachers, and there would be more great stories. Thank you very much.